Hi, my name is Dave and I am Military Door Armour. Welcome to my channel. In my last video I painted this sdkfz 251 Pakwagen in a German tricolour camouflage, and in this video I will be adding mud effects to it. I start by applying a dust layer to the areas that I want affected by the mud. I do this using Vallejo dirt, which is 71133, and I thin this down with Vallejo thinners, which is 71161. I apply this with my hardened stringback Evolution silver line with a 0.2 needle, and I thin the paint down so I can get a lot of thin coats that don't affect the colour too much, so I can build the colour up very slowly. The paint's thinned 70-30, 70% thinners and 30% paint. I don't really measure out paints when I'm mixing them, I just do it by eye, and then I'll test it on my gloved hand to make sure it doesn't spiderweb too much, and I'll adjust the air pressure on my mat valve so I get a nice flow of paint. I apply the paint in the recessed areas under where the tracks are, and also the front end where the wheels are, and I just apply it in the recessed areas. With the lighter paint I give a more general coat and then build it up in the more recessed areas to give better coverage. Once I'm happy with the application, I darken the paint using Vallejo Dark Earth, which is 71029, and I just add a few drops of this to the original mix and then apply in the same way. I darken the paint 3 or 4 times, adding more of the dark earth to the mix, and then reduce the amount I'm applying, as in leaving it in the recessed areas, and also doing a little bit of streaking, so where the actual running gear mounts to the chassis, it will be the darker areas, and also in the corners of the joints will be darker, and I just repeat this using less and less paint each time so you get a dusted effect. And here's a photo of the hull after the dust effects were applied. I also use these dust effects on the running gear, especially the rear of the wheels and the inner parts of the rear track wheels, and just on the back of the actual road wheels. Next I move on to acrylic streaking. I'll be using the same colours as with the dusting effects, which were Vallejo Dirt 71133 and Vallejo Dark Earth 71029. I'll also be using some VMS slow-mo paint retarder, which prevents the paint from drying as quickly and gives you a longer working time. In my palette I've got both of the colours with VMS paint retarder added, and also a little bit of clean water for cleaning the brush off with, and I'm using a J cloth also to help me clean the brush. I apply the paint to the same areas as I have the dusting effects, just in streaks, and I'm using a damp brush. Just blend the streaks in together, trying not to cover up all of the lower hull, so there's still some of the original colour showing through, and just to build up a nice streaking effect to add to the dusting effect. On the upper surface of the wheel well, I use a dotting motion as opposed to streaking, because it's horizontal, so the water would drip off as opposed to streak down. So I just, rather than streaking, I dapple or blend it in with a stippling motion. I repeat this process until I'm happy with the result, allow it to dry and just check it again, make sure I'm still happy, and if I am, move on to the next process. Here are some stills of the progress so far. The next stage is applying mud. For this I'll be using Vallejo European Mud, which is 73807. This is the mud paste. It's quite thick, but you can water it down either with thinners or with tap water. I'll also be darkening it with some dark panel wash, which is Vallejo 76518. The reason I'm using the black panel wash is because the darker brown is pretty much the same colour as the actual mud effect, so it won't have that much of an effect on the colour. I apply the European mud to the most recessed areas, like around the running gear and in the corners and edges where the mud would accumulate, and also towards the rear of the vehicle more than the front, because the mud would get thrown off the trucks and onto the vehicle, so you'd have less mud on the trucks at the front and more at the back. And then once I've applied the one colour, I'll darken it with a bit of the panel wash and apply that again in some of the darker areas, or just apply the panel wash with a brush directly onto the actual mud effect itself. Once I'd applied the effect and let it dry, I wasn't overly happy with the result, so I got some Vallejo airbrush cleaner and watered it down with a bit of water, just normal tap water, and applied it to the areas that I wasn't happy with, and just removed some of the mud effect off the actual vehicle to reveal some of the hull colour, and I was a lot happy with the result. I didn't actually video this, but it did work out quite well. Here are some stills of the progress so far. Next I apply some pigments. For this I use Vallejo Natural Umber 73109. I don't use too many pigments, I just moisten the surface with some water and allow that to make the pigment stick. Then I'll clear coat it with some satin clear. Next I move on to the wheels, and I'll fit these one layer at a time, weathering each layer as I go. I don't pay too much attention to the inner wheels, as you won't be able to see the effects. I just give it a little dusting. What I do is I water down some European mud, which is 73807, with some Vallejo white, which is 70951, just to dull it down a little, and I apply this around the outside of the wheels, and then apply the next set of wheels. I also water down some Vallejo Dark Earth, which is 71029, and apply this to the wheels as well, just to water down the effect a little bit more and make a little bit more different colour and contrast. I repeat the previous process on the next set of road wheels, and then once I've done that I fit the outer road wheels. Once the outer road wheels are fitted, I use a watered down Vallejo dark earth as an adhesive to mount the pigment to. The pigment I'm using is the VMS European Earth. I mount this around the outside so that it's more of a paste than a pigment, and once I've got it onto the wheels I remove it from the centres so that it's faded out to the outer edges. Then I reapply the same pigment on top of this once it's dried a bit more so that it creates a more of a dried mud effect, but again just on the outer edges of the wheels. And I repeat this application until I'm happy with the result and clean up any bits that I'm not happy with and just allow this to dry. Next I emphasise the bolt detail on the inner wheel using the Vallejo Dark Wash, which is 76518. I just apply this with a brush and then remove the excess with a dry brush. The tracks were airbrushed in a sort of dark reddy black rusty colour, and then I highlighted the rubber plates or the rubber track pads with dark rubber, and also modulated this colour by adding white to it to lighten the tone, so I had more than one colour over the track pads. Next I move on to the tracks, and for this I'm going to be using the Vallejo Natural Umber 73109 and VMS EU Dark Earth. I apply the natural umber first, and again I just use water to make this stick, and then I'll clear coat it with some satin clear, but I apply the natural umber first over the entire track surface, and then I will go over this with the EU Dark Earth from VMS and satin coat it. Then once I've fitted the tracks to the vehicle, I will do the inner edges of the tracks in the same manner. Here are some pictures of the finished tracks and the running gear. The only thing left to do now is to fit the rear doors. Before I do that, I need to chip them, and this was just done in the same manner as the body was in the previous video. That brings this video to an end. I will leave you with some stills of the finished vehicle, and my next video will be building a diorama base for this kit. I hope you enjoyed the video. I've enjoyed making it. Please feel free to leave a comment or a like. I'd love to hear from you, and I'll see you in the next video.